The dusty road stretched before Grace Morrison like a ribbon of broken promises, each mile bringing her closer to a man she had never met, but whose fate was tied to hers by paper and blood. It was late summer in 1883, and the Wyoming Territory burned under an unforgiving sun. Grace wiped the sweat from her brow with a handkerchief that had long since lost its whiteness, her traveling dress clinging to her in ways that made her wish she had worn something more practical. But she had left Cheyenne in such haste, driven by desperation, and a folder of documents that felt heavier than iron in her satchel. Her father had been dead for 3 months when the banker came calling. Thomas Morrison had been many things in his 52 years, a gambler, a dreamer, a man who believed the next hand would change everything. It never did. What he left behind was a mountain of debt that threatened to swallow Grace whole, debts that would take everything they owned, including the modest boarding house her mother had worked herself into an early grave to establish. But there was one document among her father's papers that gave Grace hope, a promissory note from a rancher named Ashford Hayes, dated 5 years prior, for the sum of $3,000. It was more than enough to settle the most pressing debts and keep the boarding house. The note was legitimate, signed and witnessed, though why her father had never collected remained a mystery. Perhaps he had forgotten. Perhaps he had meant to use it as a last resort. Well, that time had come. The town of Bentonville emerged from the heat shimmer like a mirage made solid. It was larger than Grace had expected, with a main street that boasted a bank, a general store, a hotel, and the requisite saloons that seemed to populate every settlement in the territory. Wooden sidewalks lined the street, and the sound of a blacksmith's hammer rang out in steady rhythm. Grace guided her hired horse toward the hotel, her body aching from 3 days of travel. She had spent last night in a way station that smelled of tobacco and unwashed men, catching only a few hours of fitful sleep before continuing on. Now, as she dismounted with far less grace than her name suggested, she wanted nothing more than a bath and a proper bed. "Can I help you with that horse, miss?" A young boy, no more than 12, approached with the eager expression of someone hoping for a coin or two. "Yes, please." Grace handed him the reins. "I'll need a room at the hotel. Can you direct me?" "Right there, miss." He pointed to the 2-story building with fresh paint and lace curtains visible in the windows. "Mrs. Weatherby runs a good establishment." Grace thanked him and made her way inside, where a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair looked up from the registration desk. "Welcome to Bentonville. You'll be wanting a room." "Yes, please. I'm not certain how long I'll be staying. Perhaps a few days." Grace set her satchel down carefully, protective of its contents. "That's just fine, dear. We charge by the day anyway." Mrs. Weatherby turned the ledger around. "If you'll just sign here. I'm Martha Weatherby. Grace Morrison from Cheyenne." Grace signed her name, noting that her hand trembled slightly from exhaustion. Martha's eyes softened. "You've traveled quite a way. I'll have my husband bring up hot water for a bath. Will you be taking supper in the dining room?" "Yes, thank you. That would be wonderful." Grace accepted the key. "Mrs. Weatherby, I wonder if you might help me with something else. I'm looking for a rancher named Ashford Hayes. Do you know of him?" Martha's expression changed subtly, warming further. "Oh yes, everyone knows Ash. His ranch is about 5 miles north of town, the Double H. You can't miss it, biggest spread in the valley. He's a good man, honest and fair. Are you acquainted with him?" "Not personally. I have business to discuss with him regarding a financial matter." "I see." Martha looked curious but too polite to pry. "He usually comes into town on Saturdays for supplies. That's tomorrow. You might catch him at the general store, or you could ride out to his place." Grace thanked her and climbed the stairs to her room, which proved to be clean and comfortable with a window overlooking the main street. She removed her hat and sat on the bed, pulling out the promissory note to examine it once more. The signature was bold and confident. Ashford Hayes. The date was April 15, 1878. The amount $3,000, payment due within 5 years or upon demand. The witnesses were a lawyer from Denver and another man whose name she could not quite make out. But it was legitimate. She had already confirmed that much with her own lawyer in Cheyenne. What kind of man was this Ashford Hayes? What business had he conducted with her father? And why had her father never collected? These questions circled her mind as she bathed and changed into a fresh dress, as she ate supper in the hotel dining room, and as she lay in bed that night listening to the sounds of a frontier town settling into darkness. She had to collect this debt. Everything depended on it. But something in Martha Weatherby's tone when she spoke of Ash Hayes, that warmth and respect, made Grace wonder if this would be as straightforward as she hoped. Morning came with the crow of roosters and the bustle of a town coming to life. Grace dressed carefully, choosing her most professional-looking outfit, a dark blue traveling suit with only modest bustle. She wanted to look serious, businesslike, someone who would not be dismissed or charmed out of what was owed. After a breakfast of eggs and biscuits, she asked Martha's husband, Edgar, if he could arrange for a horse and directions to the Double H Ranch. "I can do better than that," Edgar said, a tall man with the weathered face of someone who had lived his entire life under the western sky. "I need to make a delivery out that way this morning. You're welcome to ride along in the wagon." Grace accepted gratefully, and within the hour she found herself seated beside Edgar as his wagon rolled north out of Bentonville. The landscape opened up into vast grasslands dotted with cattle, mountains rising in the purple distance. Ash Hayes started that ranch with nothing but grit and determination, Edgar told her as they rode. "Came out here 10 years ago from Kansas, worked as a ranch hand for old Samuel Porter until Porter passed. Porter left him enough to buy his own land, and Ash built it into something substantial. He employs about 20 men, treats them fair, pays them on time. Folks around here respect him." "Is he married?" Grace asked, then felt her cheeks warm at how the question might sound. Edgar chuckled. "No, madam. He's been too busy building his ranch, I suppose. There's been ladies who have tried to catch his eye, but he's particular. Says he won't marry unless it's for the right reasons." Grace filed this information away, feeling a strange flutter of something she refused to name. It did not matter what kind of man Ashford Hayes was personally. She was here for business, nothing more. The ranch appeared as they crested a rise. A sprawling operation with a large main house built of logs and stone, several barns, corrals filled with horses, and pastures stretching in every direction. It looked prosperous and well-maintained, which gave Grace hope that he would be able to pay the debt without difficulty. A dog barked as they approached, and several ranch hands looked up from their work. Edgar guided the wagon toward the main house, where a man emerged from the largest barn, wiping his hands on his pants. Grace felt her breath catch. Ashford Hayes was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. He wore work clothes, denim pants and a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms tanned and muscled. His hair was dark brown, slightly too long, and his face was handsome in a rugged way that had nothing to do with prettiness and everything to do with strength and character. He looked to be in his early 30s, perhaps 32 or 33. But it was his eyes that struck her most, a clear, steady gray that assessed the wagon and its passengers with intelligence and a hint of curiosity. "Morning, Edgar," he called out, his voice deep and pleasant. "I wasn't expecting a delivery today." "No delivery, Ash. I brought you a visitor. This is Miss Grace Morrison from Cheyenne. She says she has business with you." Ash's gaze shifted fully to Grace, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. He approached the wagon and held up a hand to help her down. She hesitated for only a moment before accepting, his hand warm and calloused as it enfolded hers. "Miss Morrison." He released her hand as soon as she was steady on the ground. "Welcome to the Double H. What kind of business brings you all the way from Cheyenne?" Grace straightened her shoulders and met his eyes. "I believe you knew my father, Thomas Morrison. You owe him a substantial sum of money, and I've come to collect." For a moment, the only sounds were the lowing of distant cattle and the creak of Edgar's wagon. Ash's expression did not change dramatically, but something flickered in those gray eyes, recognition perhaps, or memory. "Thomas Morrison," he said slowly. "Yes, I knew him." "I'm very sorry for your loss, Miss Morrison. I heard he passed some months ago." Grace blinked. "You heard? News travels, even out here. I was sorry to hear it. Your father was a good man, saved my life once." He paused, then gestured toward the house. "This conversation deserves better than being held in the yard. Would you come inside? Edgar, will you stay?" "No, I need to get back to town. I can pick up Miss Morrison on my way back if she needs a ride." "That won't be necessary. I'll see that she gets back to Bentonville safely." Ash looked at Grace. "If that's acceptable to you, Miss Morrison," she nodded, her mind still caught on his words. Her father had saved his life. She knew nothing of this. Edgar departed, and Ash led her toward the house. Up close, the building was even more impressive, solid and built to last, with a wide porch that wrapped around at least two sides. Inside, the main room was spacious and surprisingly well appointed. The furniture was handmade but of good quality, the floor was swept clean, and books lined a shelf near the stone fireplace. "Please sit." Ash gestured to a chair near the unlit fireplace. "May I offer you something to drink? Water, coffee?" "Coffee would be fine, thank you." Grace sat, placing her satchel carefully beside her chair. Ash disappeared into what she assumed was the kitchen and returned shortly with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one and sat across from her in another chair, his long legs stretched out, his manner relaxed but attentive. "Now," he said, "tell me about this debt you've come to collect." Grace set her coffee down and pulled the promissory note from her satchel, unfolding it and handing it to him. "My father left behind substantial debts when he died. I've been trying to settle his affairs, and I found this among his papers. $3,000 signed by you 5 years ago with payment due upon demand. I'm making that demand now, Mr. Hayes." Ash studied the document, his face unreadable. "Yes, this is my signature. The debt is legitimate." Relief flooded through Grace. "Then you'll honor it, of course. I'm a man of my word, Miss Morrison." He looked up from the paper, his gray eyes steady on hers. "But I have to say, I'm surprised your father never collected. I tried to pay him several times over the years." Grace frowned. "You did?" "Yes. The first time was about 6 months after I signed this note. I rode down to Denver where he was staying and tried to give him the money. He refused, said he did not need it yet, that I should keep building my ranch. I tried again 2 years later, and again he refused. The last time I saw him was about 3 years ago in Cheyenne. I had the full amount with me in cash. He told me he wanted me to have it, that he considered it an investment in a good man's future." Grace sat back, stunned. This sounded nothing like the father she knew, the man who gambled away everything they had. "I don't understand. Why would he do that?" Ash leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, the promissory note still in his hands. "Did he ever tell you how we met?" "No." I didn't know he knew you at all until I found that note. It was in Denver in the spring of 1878. I had just sold a small herd of cattle, had more money in my pocket than I'd ever carried before. I was young and stupid, and I went into a saloon to celebrate. There was a card game, and I joined it, thinking I knew what I was doing. He shook his head at the memory. I didn't. One of the players was cheating, and when I called him on it, things got ugly fast. He pulled a gun. Your father was at another table, and he saw what was happening. He intervened, talked the man down, made it seem like it was all a misunderstanding. Probably saved my life, or at least saved me from serious injury. Grace listened, trying to reconcile this story with the man she had known. Afterward, your father and I talked. I told him about my plans for a ranch, about the land I wanted to buy. I was short on the funds, needed another $3,000. He gave it to me, right there. Insisted on the promissory note only because he said a man should document his business dealings, keep things proper. But he also said something else. Ash paused, his expression softening with memory. He said he had a daughter back in Cheyenne who was the best thing he'd ever done in his life, and that everything he did was for her. He said maybe one day I'd understand what it meant to want to build something for the people you loved. Tears burned Grace's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. He said that, he did. And over the years, when I tried to pay him back, he always said the same thing. That you were taken care of, that your mother ran a good boarding house, that he wanted me to succeed because he saw something in me that reminded him of what he wished he'd been. The tears spilled over now, and Grace could not stop them. All this time, she had been so angry at her father for his gambling, for his failures. She had not known about this, about his faith in a stranger, about his attempts to do something good. "I'm sorry," she whispered, accepting the handkerchief Ash offered. "I didn't know any of this. After he died, there were so many debts, so many people demanding payment. The boarding house, it's all I have left, all my mother worked for. If I can't pay his debts, they'll take it." Ash was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to a desk in the corner of the room. He opened a drawer and pulled out a metal box, which he brought back to where they sat. He opened it to reveal neat stacks of bills and a ledger. "The $3,000 is yours, Miss Morrison. It's what's owed, and I'll pay it gladly." He began counting out the money, his movements precise and deliberate. "Your father gave me my start, gave me the chance to build all this. The least I can do is honor the debt now that you need it." Grace watched him count, her heart a confused tumult of relief and sadness and something else she could not name. This man, this stranger, spoke of her father with more respect and warmth than she had felt in years, and he was giving her the money without argument, without negotiation. There. Ash set the counted bills on the small table between them. $3,000 as promised. I can write you a receipt if you'd like for your records." "Yes, please." Grace's voice came out rough, and she cleared her throat. Ash wrote out a receipt in clear, strong handwriting, noting the date, the amount, and that the promissory note was paid in full. He signed it and handed it to her along with the money. Grace took both, her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes. You've saved everything that matters to me. I'm glad I could help. Your father helped me when I needed it most. It's only right that I do the same for his daughter." He paused, then added, "Will you stay for lunch? It's nearly noon, and I'd like to hear more about your father if you're willing to talk about him. I feel like I knew a side of him you didn't, and maybe you knew sides of him I never saw. It seems a shame not to share those stories." Grace hesitated. Every practical bone in her body said she should take the money and return to Bentonville immediately, catch the next stage to Cheyenne, and settle her father's affairs. But something in Ash's expression, a genuine interest, A kindness that felt rare and precious made her want to stay. "I would like that," she said softly. "Thank you." Ash smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard lines and making him look younger. "Good. I should warn you I'm not much of a cook, but I can manage a decent meal. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, usually cooks, but she's visiting her sister in town today." He led her into the kitchen, which was large and well organized, with a modern stove and a pantry stocked with supplies. As Ash pulled out bread, cheese, and cold roast beef, Grace found herself relaxing, the tension that had carried her through 3 days of travel finally easing. "Tell me about Cheyenne," Ash said as he worked. "I haven't been there in a few years. Has it changed much?" Grace described the growing city, the new buildings going up, the railroad bringing more people every month. She told him about the boarding house, how her mother had started it 15 years ago when they first moved to Wyoming, how it had been a refuge for travelers and newcomers alike. "Your mother must have been a remarkable woman," Ash observed, setting 2 plates on the kitchen table. "She was. She died when I was 17, 6 years ago. It's been just my father and me since then, though I was the one running the boarding house. He was often away, chasing his next opportunity." She could not keep the bitterness entirely from her voice. "He loved you very much," Ash said quietly. "That much was clear every time he spoke of you. Whatever his faults, and we all have them, that love was real." Grace looked down at her plate, emotions welling up again. "I wish I had known about this, about you, about what he did. I spent so much time being angry at him. Maybe that's why he never collected the debt. Maybe he wanted to leave you something that could help you when you needed it most." Ash met her eyes across the table. He must have known his gambling would catch up with him eventually. Perhaps this was his way of providing for you one last time. The thought had not occurred to Grace, but as soon as Ash spoke it, it felt true. Her father had always been a schemer, always thinking 3 steps ahead. Maybe this had been his plan all along, a safety net he hoped she would never need but kept in place just in case. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing more easily than Grace would have thought possible with a stranger. Ash was intelligent and well-spoken, despite his rural life. He asked thoughtful questions and listened intently to her answers. He told her about building the ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle in Wyoming's harsh climate, about the men who worked for him and had become like family. "You ever get lonely out here?" Grace asked, then worried the question was too personal, but Ash did not seem offended. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The work keeps me busy and I have good men around me, but there are moments, usually in the evening when the work is done and the house is quiet, when I feel the solitude. I always thought by now I would have a wife, maybe children. But the right woman never came along, and I refused to settle for anything less than what my parents had." What did they have? A partnership. Real love built on respect and friendship. "They died when I was 20, a fever that swept through our town in Kansas. But I remember how they were with each other, how they faced everything together. That's what I want. That's what I'm waiting for." Grace felt her heart do something strange in her chest, a flutter that had nothing to do with anxiety and everything to do with the man sitting across from her. She pushed the feeling aside. She had known him for only a few hours. Such feelings were absurd. After lunch, Ash offered to show her around the ranch, and Grace accepted. They walked through the barns where sleek horses nickered from their stalls, past corrals where ranch hands were working with young colts, and out to a rise that overlooked the entire property. "It's beautiful," Grace said, taking in the sweep of grassland, the distant mountains, the sky so vast and blue it made her chest ache. "You've built something remarkable here. Thanks to your father's faith in me." Ash stood beside her, his hands in his pockets. "Miss Morrison, I have a proposition for you." Grace turned to look at him, surprised. "A proposition?" He seemed to choose his words carefully. "The $3,000 I gave you, that's what's owed legally, but I feel like I owe your father more than money. He gave me a chance at this life, and I'd like to honor that in a way that means something. If you're willing, I'd like to help you more than just paying off debts. I'd like to invest in your boarding house, help you expand it or improve it, make it even more successful. No interest, no strings attached, just one businessman helping another." Grace stared at him. "Mr. Hayes, I can't accept that. You've already given me $3,000. That's more than generous. It's not about generosity. It's about doing what's right, about honoring your father's memory in a real way." He met her eyes, his expression earnest. "Please think about it at least. You don't have to decide now. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. Say you'll let me write to you, and we can discuss the details." He paused. "Say you'll come visit again, so I can show you the ranch in spring when everything's green and new." There was something in his voice on that last part, a warmth that made Grace's pulse quicken. She realized with a start that she wanted to come back, wanted to see this place in spring, wanted to know this man better. "I'll think about it," she said softly. "And yes, I would like to visit again if the invitation is genuine." "It's genuine, Miss Morrison, very much so." They stood there on the rise for another moment, the wind tugging at Grace's skirts, the sun warm on their faces. Grace felt something shifting inside her, something fundamental changing. She had come here angry and desperate, seeing Ashford Hayes as nothing more than a means to an end. But now she saw him as he truly was. A good man, an honorable man, someone who had cared about her father and who seemed to be developing a care for her as well. The afternoon was wearing on when Ash finally brought his wagon around to take Grace back to Bentonville. She sat beside him on the bench seat, very aware of his presence, of the strength in his hands as he handled the reins, of the easy way he moved with the rhythm of the wagon. "Will you be leaving for Cheyenne soon?" he asked as they rolled along the road. "I should leave tomorrow or the next day. I need to get this money to the bank, settle the debts." Grace touched her satchel where the money was carefully secured. "There's so much to arrange." "Of course. But if you can spare one more day, there's a dance in town tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just the community getting together at the church hall. I'd be honored if you'd accompany me." Grace's heart leaped. "A dance, if you're interested. If not, I understand. You must be eager to get home." But there was something hopeful in his voice, something that made her want to say yes despite all the practical reasons to decline. "I would love to attend the dance with you, Mr. Hayes." His smile was bright as sunrise. "Please call me Ash. Mr. Hayes makes me feel like my father." "Then you must call me Grace." "Grace." He said her name like he was tasting something sweet. "It suits you." They rode the rest of the way to Bentonville in comfortable conversation, talking about everything and nothing, discovering small commonalities and laughing at shared observations. By the time they arrived at the hotel, Grace felt as if she had known Ash for years rather than hours. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. "I'll come by at 7 tomorrow evening if that's all right." 7 is perfect. "Good night, Grace. Sleep well." He tipped his hat and climbed back onto the wagon, but not before she saw the smile still playing on his lips. Grace watched him drive away, then turned to find Martha Weatherby standing in the hotel doorway, a knowing look on her face. "Well," Martha said with a smile. That looked promising. Grace felt her cheeks warm but could not help smiling back. "He's invited me to the dance tomorrow." "Has he now? My. Ash Hayes doesn't usually attend those dances, even though half the unmarried women in the county hope he will." "You must have made quite an impression." He paid the debt my father owed him, Grace said, following Martha inside. $3,000 without argument or delay. That sounds like Ash. He's honest to his bones. Did you get your business settled then? Yes, completely. Grace clutched her satchel. Mrs. Weatherby, do you know if the bank here is secure? I'd like to deposit this money until I can arrange transport back to Cheyenne. Henry Dalton runs the bank, and he's as trustworthy as they come. The bank doesn't open again until Monday morning, but you can put your valuables in our safe if you'd like. Edgar and I have one in our private quarters. Grace accepted this offer gratefully, and within a few minutes, the money was secured in the Weatherby's safe, with a receipt written out in Martha's neat hand. That night, Grace lay in her bed and thought about everything that had happened. She had come to Bentonville expecting a fight, expecting to have to argue and perhaps threaten legal action to collect what was owed. Instead, she had found a man of integrity who spoke of her father with respect and affection, who had paid the debt immediately, and who had offered even more help. And then there was the other part, the way her heart had reacted to Ash, the way she had felt standing beside him on that rise overlooking his ranch, the way he had looked at her, like she was something precious and surprising. She barely knew him. It was foolish to read too much into one afternoon. And yet, she could not deny the connection she had felt, swift and unexpected as a summer storm. Tomorrow night's dance would tell her more. Tomorrow night, she would see Ash Hayes away from his ranch, among his community, and she would learn if what she felt was real or just the result of relief and gratitude. But deep down, in a place she was not quite ready to acknowledge, she suspected it was more than that. Much more. The next day passed slowly for Grace. She had breakfast in the hotel dining room, then took a walk around Bentonville, exploring the town properly for the first time. She stopped in the general store and bought a few small items, engaged in polite conversation with the proprietor, and learned that Ash was well liked in the community, known for his fairness and his willingness to help neighbors in need. In the afternoon, she returned to the hotel and took extra care with her appearance. She had packed one nice dress for the trip, a dove gray silk with cream lace at the collar and cuffs. It was not a ball gown by any means, but it was appropriate for a country dance and made her feel pretty in a way her traveling clothes did not. Martha helped her arrange her hair, sweeping the dark blonde waves up into a style that was both elegant and practical. "You look lovely, dear," Martha said, stepping back to admire her work. "Ash won't be able to take his eyes off you." Grace blushed but smiled. "You're too kind. I'm honest, and I'm happy for you both if you don't mind me saying so. Ash deserves someone special, and you seem like a woman of substance and character." At precisely 7 o'clock, Ash arrived in a clean wagon with a bench seat covered by a blanket. He himself looked transformed from the working rancher she had met yesterday. He wore black pants, a white shirt with a string tie, and a vest that accentuated his broad shoulders. His hair was still slightly damp from washing, combed back neatly. His eyes widened when he saw Grace, and for a moment he seemed at a loss for words. "Grace, you look beautiful." "Thank you." "You look very handsome yourself." He helped her into the wagon, and they set off toward the church at the edge of town. Already, Grace could hear music drifting through the evening air, fiddles and a guitar, voices raised in laughter and song. The church hall was a simple wooden building next to the white steepled church, but inside it had been transformed with lanterns hung from the rafters, bunting decorating the walls, and a long table laden with food brought by the community members. At least 50 people were already there, couples dancing in the center of the hall while others stood around the edges talking and laughing. Ash led Grace inside, his hand at the small of her back, and immediately they were surrounded by people eager to meet her and greet him. Grace was introduced to so many people that she knew she would never remember all their names, but she noted the genuine warmth with which everyone treated Ash and the curious but friendly looks she received. "Ash Hayes with a date," one older woman said with a twinkle in her eye. "I never thought I'd see the day," Ash laughed. "Mrs. Patterson, may I introduce Miss Grace Morrison from Cheyenne? Grace, this is Alina Patterson, the finest baker in all of Wyoming." "Oh, go on with you," Alina said, but she looked pleased. To Grace, she added, "He's a charmer, this one, but he's also one of the good ones. You hang on to him." Before Grace could respond to this bold statement, the music started up again, a lively reel, and Ash turned to her. "Would you like to dance?" "I'd love to." He led her onto the floor, and Grace discovered that he was a good dancer, confident without being showy, able to lead her through the steps with ease. They whirled and spun with the other couples, the music infectious, the joy in the room palpable. As the evening wore on, Grace felt herself relaxing completely, laughing more freely than she had in months. Ash introduced her to his ranch foreman, a weathered man named Frank who had nothing but praise for his employer. She met the schoolteacher, the banker, the doctor, all of them part of this tight-knit community. During a slower dance, Ash pulled her closer, his hand warm on her waist. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "Very much. Thank you for inviting me. Everyone here is so kind. They're good people. This town, this community, it's become my home in ways I never expected." He paused, his gray eyes searching her face. "I know you have to go back to Cheyenne, but I meant what I said yesterday. I'd like you to visit again. I'd like to get to know you better, Grace." Her heart hammered in her chest. "I'd like that too, very much. There's something between us, isn't there? It's not just me feeling it." Grace looked up at him, at his honest, open face, and decided to be equally honest. "No, it's not just you. I feel it too. I don't understand it. We barely know each other, but yes, I feel it." His smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Good. That's good. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you showed up at my ranch yesterday. The way you stood there, so brave and determined, demanding what was owed. The way you cried when I told you about your father. The way you looked at my ranch like you could see what it meant to me. I kept thinking, this is a woman I want to know. This is a woman who could matter." Ash. His name came out as barely a whisper. They had stopped dancing, standing still in the middle of the floor while other couples moved around them. "Too much?" he asked, a hint of worry in his voice. "I'm sorry, I tend to say what I mean. It's a bad habit." "No, it's not too much. It's perfect. You're perfect." Grace felt dizzy with the truth of it, with the speed at which her feelings were developing. "But I have to go back to Cheyenne. I have responsibilities there, the boarding house, my father's affairs to fully settle. I can't just stay here because of feelings that might fade or change." "I know. I'm not asking you to stay now. I'm asking if I can court you properly, write to you, visit you in Cheyenne. I'm asking for a chance to see if what we're both feeling is real and lasting." His hand tightened on hers. "Will you give me that chance?" Grace thought of all the practical objections, the distance between Bentonville and Cheyenne, the fact that they had known each other for barely 2 days, the complications and uncertainties. But then she looked into his eyes and saw the same certainty she felt in her own heart. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll give you that chance. I want to see where this leads." The smile that broke across his face made her want to cry with happiness. He pulled her close, almost but not quite improper for a public dance, and they swayed together to the music, wrapped in their own private world despite the crowd around them. Later, they stepped outside for air, standing beneath a sky full of stars that seemed to burn brighter here than they ever did in Cheyenne. The music was muffled now, a pleasant background to the night sounds of the prairie. "When do you have to leave?" Ash asked, standing close beside her. "I should leave Monday, take the stage from Bentonville to Cheyenne. The sooner I get this money to the bank, the sooner I can settle everything and breathe easy again." "Monday, that gives us tomorrow." He turned to face her fully. "Spend the day with me tomorrow. Let me show you more of the ranch, take you riding if you're comfortable on a horse. I'll pack a picnic and we can ride up into the hills. There's a place I want to show you, a valley where wildflowers grow thick in spring. It's beautiful even now at the end of summer." "I'd love that. I haven't been riding in years, but I used to be fairly competent." "Then it's settled. I'll come for you at 9 if that's not too early. 9 is perfect." They stayed outside a while longer, talking quietly, learning more about each other. Ash told her about his childhood in Kansas, about his parents' small farm and the dreams he had carried west. Grace told him about her mother's boarding house, about the guests who had become like family, about her hopes to expand the business and make it something her mother would be proud of. When he finally drove her back to the hotel, the night had grown late and cool. He helped her down from the wagon and walked her to the door, his hand holding hers. "Thank you for tonight," Grace said. "It was wonderful. Thank you for saying yes. To the dance, to letting me court you, to all of it." He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "Until tomorrow, Grace. Until tomorrow, Ash." She floated up to her room, her heart singing, and fell asleep with a smile on her face. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for riding. Grace dressed in her most practical outfit and was waiting when Ash arrived promptly at 9. He had brought a gentle mare for her, a pretty dapple gray with kind eyes. "This is Misty," he said, introducing the horse. "She's well-mannered and sure-footed. She'll take good care of you." Grace mounted with only a little awkwardness, her body remembering the skill even if she was rusty. Ash swung up onto his own horse, a tall bay gelding, and they set off at an easy pace. The morning was glorious, the air crisp with the first hint of autumn's approach. They rode through Ash's pasturelands, and he pointed out various features of his ranch, explaining his plans for expansion and improvement. Grace asked intelligent questions, drawing on her own business experience with the boarding house, and Ash seemed pleased by her interest and insight. After about an hour, they began climbing into the hills, following a narrow trail that wound between pines and aspens. The trees were just beginning to turn, hints of gold appearing among the green. "It's not much farther," Ash said, turning in his saddle to check on Grace. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine. A bit sore, but in a good way. I'd forgotten how much I enjoy riding." Finally, they crested a rise, and Ash led them down into a small valley, sheltered on 3 sides by hills. Even in late summer, it was beautiful, with a stream running through the center and grasses that still held some green. Grace could imagine what it must look like in spring, carpeted with wildflowers. They dismounted, and Ash spread a blanket near the stream while Grace explored, delighting in the wildness and peace of the place. When she returned, he had unpacked a meal of cold chicken, bread, cheese, and apples, along with a jar of lemonade. "This is incredible," Grace said, settling onto the blanket beside him. "Thank you for bringing me here." "I've never brought anyone else to this spot," Ash admitted. "I found it my first year here when I was still learning the land. It felt like my own secret place, somewhere to come when I needed to think or just be still. I wanted to share it with you." They ate and talked, the conversation ranging from serious to playful. Ash told her funny stories about ranch life, about ornery cattle and clever horses. Grace shared memories of quirky boarding house guests and life in Cheyenne. They laughed together, easily and often, and Grace marveled at how natural it all felt. After they finished eating, they lay back on the blanket, looking up at the sky through the frame of golden aspen leaves. Their hands found each other, fingers interlacing. "Grace," Ash said after a while, "I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other for 2 days, but I need you to know that I'm serious about this, about you. I'm not a man who plays with emotions or makes promises lightly." Grace turned her head to look at him, finding him already looking at her. "I know, I can see that in you, and I'm serious too, Ash. I don't understand how this happened so quickly, but I can't deny what I feel." "What do you feel?" His voice was soft, but there was intensity in his eyes. "Like I've been waiting for you without knowing it. Like everything that's happened, even the hard things, even losing my father, it all led me here to you. Like this is where I'm supposed to be." The words tumbled out, more honest than she had planned to be. Ash released her hand and propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her. "That's exactly how I feel. Like you walked into my ranch and my life, and suddenly everything made sense in a way it never has before." He reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch sending warmth through her. "May I kiss you, Grace?" Her breath caught. "Yes." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, Grace felt as if she were falling and flying at the same time. His hand cupped her cheek, and she reached up to touch his hair, marveling at the tenderness and passion combined in his kiss. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ash rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Grace Morrison. I know it's too soon to say that, but it's true." Tears pricked her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I'm falling in love with you too, Ash Hayes." "And you're right. It's too soon, it's crazy, but I can't help it." They kissed again, longer this time, and Grace felt the last of her reservations melting away. This was real. Whatever had sparked between them that first moment in his ranch yard, it was real and true and worth pursuing. They spent the rest of the afternoon in that hidden valley, talking and dreaming and stealing kisses like teenagers. Ash told her about his vision for the ranch, how he wanted to build it into something that could support a family, that could last for generations. Grace shared her dreams for the boarding house, how she wanted to create not just a place for people to stay, but a real home away from home. "When you come back," Ash said, "and I mean when, not if, I want you to see all the possibilities. I want you to imagine yourself here, building a life with me." "Is that too presumptuous?" "Maybe," Grace said with a smile, "but I like it anyway. I want to imagine that too." As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, they reluctantly packed up and mounted their horses for the ride back. Grace was definitely sore now, her muscles protesting the unaccustomed exercise, but she did not care. She would have gladly stayed in that valley with Ash forever. Back at the ranch, Ash insisted on having one of his men drive Grace back to town, so he could ride beside the wagon and have a few more minutes with her. As they rolled toward Bentonville in the gathering dusk, Ash reached across from his horse to hold her hand where it rested on the wagon seat. "I'll write to you as soon as you're back in Cheyenne," he promised. "And I'll visit as soon as I can get away from the ranch, maybe in a month or so. Can you wait that long?" "I'll wait as long as it takes," Grace assured him. "But I hope it's not too long. I'm going to miss you." "I'm going to miss you too, more than you know." At the hotel, Ash helped her down from the wagon and walked her to the door, ignoring the ranch hand waiting patiently in the wagon. "Travel safely tomorrow. Send me a telegram when you arrive so I know you're safe." "I will," and Ash. Grace stood on tiptoe and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for everything. For the money, yes, but more than that. Thank you for telling me about my father, for helping me see him differently. Thank you for showing me your world. Thank you for being exactly who you are." His arm came around her waist, pulling her close for one more kiss, deeper and more passionate than the ones they had shared in the valley, as if he were trying to memorize the feel of her. "Come back to me," he whispered against her lips. "Promise you'll come back." "I promise," she whispered back. "I'll come back. This isn't goodbye, just a temporary farewell." Finally, reluctantly, they parted. Grace watched him ride away into the darkness, her heart already aching with his absence but also full of joy and hope. The next morning, Grace deposited the $3,000 at the bank, receiving a bank draft she could present in Cheyenne. She said her goodbyes to Martha and Edgar Weatherby, who both hugged her warmly and made her promise to return. "We'll be expecting you," Martha said with a knowing smile. "And we'll be expecting news of a wedding before too long, I'm thinking." The stage ride back to Cheyenne gave Grace plenty of time to think and process everything that had happened. In less than a week, her entire life had changed. She had gone from desperate and grieving to hopeful and in love. She had gained not just the money to save her home, but also a new understanding of her father, and a relationship that felt like it could become everything she had never dared to dream of. Back in Cheyenne, Grace threw herself into settling her father's affairs. The bank draft allowed her to pay off the most pressing debts, and she worked with a lawyer to establish a payment plan for the rest. The boarding house was saved, and with it, Grace's livelihood and independence. True to his word, Ash's first letter arrived within a week of her return. It was long and heartfelt, full of details about the ranch and his days, but also filled with expressions of how much he missed her, how often he thought of her, how empty the house seemed now that he knew what it was to have her in it. Grace wrote back immediately, and thus began a correspondence that sustained them both through the weeks of separation. They wrote to each other almost daily, long letters that explored their thoughts and feelings, their pasts and their hopes for the future. Through these letters, they continued to fall deeper in love, learning each other's hearts and minds in ways that might have taken much longer in person. 6 weeks after Grace had returned to Cheyenne, Ash sent a telegram announcing that he would be arriving the following week to visit. Grace's heart soared, and she spent those days in a frenzy of preparation, making sure the boarding house was spotless and arranging for Ash to stay in their best room. When he finally arrived, stepping down from the train onto the platform where Grace waited, she forgot all about propriety and ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her easily, spinning her around before setting her down and kissing her soundly, not caring about the scandalized looks from some of the other travelers. "I missed you so much," Grace said, her face pressed against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "Not as much as I missed you," Ash replied, his arms tight around her. It felt like a lifetime, those 6 weeks. Grace had arranged for a week of his visit, and they made the most of every moment. She showed him around Cheyenne, introduced him to her friends and the regular guests at the boarding house, took him to her favorite places. They went to dinner and the theater, walked through parks, and spent long evenings sitting in the boarding house parlor talking after the other guests had retired. On the 4th night of his visit, as they sat together on the porch swing watching the stars, Ash took Grace's hand and turned to face her. "Grace, I can't wait any longer. I know it's only been 2 months since we met, but in my heart, I've known since that first day. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness, your intelligence and your grace. I love how you handle challenges, how you care for the people in your boarding house like their family, how you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love everything about you, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He slid off the swing and onto one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Grace Morrison, will you marry me? Will you come back to Bentonville and be my wife, build a life with me on the ranch? I know I'm asking you to leave your home, your business, everything you've built here, and I don't ask lightly. But I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making you happy, making sure you never regret saying yes. Grace's vision blurred with tears. This was happening. This was real. The man she loved was asking her to marry him, offering her a future she had never imagined but now wanted more than anything. "Yes," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you, Ash. I love you so much, and yes, I want to build a life with you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the lamplight beautifully. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion and joy that made her dizzy. "You've made me the happiest man alive," he murmured against her hair. "I promise you won't regret this." "I know I won't. How could I regret choosing love? How could I regret choosing you?" They sat back down on the swing, Grace's head on Ash's shoulder, his arm around her, both of them marveling at the turn their lives had taken. They talked late into the night, making plans. They decided to marry in early November, giving Grace 2 months to arrange her affairs in Cheyenne. The most challenging part was deciding what to do about the boarding house. Grace had worked so hard to maintain it, to honor her mother's legacy. But she also knew she wanted to be with Ash in Bentonville, wanted to build their life together on his ranch in the end. She decided to sell the boarding house to one of her longtime guests, a widow named Mrs. Harriet Sullivan, who had been living there for 3 years and had often helped Grace with the management. Harriet was thrilled at the opportunity and arranged to buy the business with help from her son in Denver. The sale would give Grace enough money to enter her marriage with financial independence, something both she and Ash agreed was important. She would not be a woman dependent on her husband's charity, but a true partner, bringing her own resources to their union. The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. Grace sold the boarding house, packed her belongings, and said goodbye to Cheyenne. It was bittersweet, leaving the city that had been her home for 15 years, but her excitement about the future with Ash overshadowed any sadness. They decided to marry in Bentonville, in the same church hall where they had danced together that first Saturday night. Grace arrived a week before the wedding, staying at the hotel with Martha and Edgar Weatherby, who fussed over her like she was their own daughter. The wedding was small but perfect, attended by the entire community of Bentonville, many of whom Grace had already come to know through her correspondence with Ash and her visits over the past 2 months. She wore a beautiful dress of ivory silk, and Ash wore a black suit that made him look impossibly handsome. When they stood before the minister and exchanged their vows, Grace felt a sense of rightness, of coming home, that had nothing to do with place and everything to do with the man whose hands held hers. "I, Ashford, take you, Grace, to be my lawfully wedded wife," Ash said, his voice strong and clear, his eyes never leaving hers. "I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for as long as we both shall live. You are my partner, my love, my heart." Grace's voice shook with emotion as she repeated her own vows, but the words came from the depths of her soul. "I, Grace, take you, Ashford, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and cherish you, to stand by your side and build a life with you, to be your partner in all things. You are my home, my love, my future." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Ash kissed her, the small church erupted in applause and cheers. Grace laughed against her husband's lips, overwhelmed with joy. The reception was held in the same church hall, with tables laden with food and a band playing lively music. Grace and Ash danced their first dance as husband and wife to a waltz, moving together as if they had been dancing for years instead of months. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Hayes?" Ash asked, his lips close to her ear. "It feels like everything I never knew I wanted," Grace replied. "It feels perfect." That night, Ash carried Grace over the threshold of the ranch house, their home now, and they began their married life together with passion and tenderness and joy. The first months of marriage were an adjustment as they learned to live together, to navigate each other's habits and preferences. Grace threw herself into making the ranch house truly a home, adding touches of warmth and beauty to what had been a functional but somewhat sparse bachelor dwelling. She planted a kitchen garden, hung curtains, and filled the house with the smells of baking and cooking. She also began to learn about ranch management, riding out with Ash to check on the cattle, learning to keep the books, and getting to know the ranch hands who worked for them. Frank, the foreman, became a good friend, teaching her about cattle and horses with endless patience. Grace discovered that she loved ranch life, loved the rhythm of the seasons and the connection to the land. She loved waking up next to Ash every morning, loved sharing meals with him, loved the evenings when they would sit together on their porch and watch the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. In the spring, Ash took her back to the hidden valley where he had first kissed her, and they found it carpeted in wildflowers just as he had promised. They spread a blanket and spent the afternoon there, and it was in that valley that Grace told him she was expecting their first child. Ash's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He pulled her into his arms and held her close, his face buried in her hair, and she felt the wetness of his tears against her skin. "We're going to have a baby," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Grace, we're going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, even though she could feel the answer in the way he held her. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. I'm overwhelmed. I'm terrified. I'm more grateful than I ever thought possible." He pulled back to look at her face, his hands framing her cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you for being my wife, for loving me, for giving me this gift." "Thank you for finding me," Grace replied. "For paying that debt and asking for my heart in return. Best business transaction I ever made." He laughed and kissed her, and they lay together in the field of wildflowers, dreaming about their child and their future. Their son was born in January of 1885, on a snowy evening when the world outside was white and hushed. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Ash feared he might lose Grace, but she was strong and determined, and finally, their baby came into the world with a lusty cry that filled the house with life. They named him Thomas, after Grace's father, and Ashford after his own. Thomas Ashford Hayes, a name that honored both their pasts and looked toward the future. Ash proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to walk the floor with a crying baby, changing diapers without complaint, and gazing at his son with an expression of wonder that never quite faded. Grace watched him with Thomas and fell even more deeply in love with her husband. As Thomas grew from a baby to a toddler and then a little boy, Grace and Ash's ranch continued to prosper. They expanded their herd, built new barns, and hired more men. The ranch became known throughout Wyoming as one of the finest operations in the territory, but more than that, it became known as a place where workers were treated fairly and with respect. When Thomas was 3, they had a daughter, Elizabeth, named after Ash's mother. Beth was as different from her brother as night from day, quiet and contemplative where Thomas was boisterous and adventurous. Grace loved watching them play together, loved the family they had created. In the evenings, after the children were in bed, Grace and Ash would sit together on their porch, just as they had from the beginning, and talk about their days, their dreams, their blessings. Sometimes they would speak of that first meeting, of how unlikely their love story had been. Do you ever regret it? Ash asked one evening, his arm around Grace's shoulders. Leaving Cheyenne, leaving your mother's boarding house, all of it. Grace turned to look at him, at the face she loved more with each passing year, at the silver just beginning to appear in his dark hair, at the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun and smiling. Never. Not once. You gave me more than I ever could have imagined, Ash. You gave me a home, a family, a life full of love and purpose. How could I regret that? I gave you those things. Grace, you gave them to me. Before you, this ranch was just buildings and land. You made it a home. You made it matter. She leaned her head against his shoulder, comfortable in the silence that fell between them. After a while, she said, "Do you remember what you said to me that first day when you paid the debt?" What did I say? You said my father told you that maybe one day you would understand what it meant to want to build something for the people you loved. Do you understand it now? Ash was quiet for a moment, then his arm tightened around her. Yes, I understand it completely. Everything I do, every decision I make, it's for you and our children. It's all for love. That's what my father was doing too, in his own flawed way. He was trying to build something for me. It just took me a long time to understand that. He would be proud of you, Grace. Proud of the woman you are, the mother you've become, the life you've built. Grace felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, healing tears. I hope so. I like to think he had a hand in bringing us together, that he knew somehow that you were exactly what I needed. Maybe he did. Maybe that's why he never collected the debt, why he kept putting me off. Maybe he was waiting for the right time, for when you would need it and me both. It was a romantic notion, perhaps too romantic, but Grace liked it anyway. She liked thinking that her father's last gift to her had been Ash, had been this life. Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Beth developed a talent for drawing and painting, capturing the beauty of Wyoming in her artwork. When Thomas was 12 and Beth was 9, Grace gave birth to another son, Robert, a surprise baby who brought new energy and laughter into their home. The territory became a state in 1890, and Bentonville continued to grow and prosper. The ranch remained at the center of Ash and Grace's life, but they also became leaders in the community, hosting gatherings, supporting the church and school, helping neighbors in times of trouble. Grace never forgot what it was like to struggle, to face debts that seemed insurmountable, to wonder if she would lose everything. She made sure that any family in the area who faced similar troubles found help and support, often without ever knowing it came from the Hayes family. Ash teased her about her soft heart, but he supported every one of her charitable efforts, proud of his wife's compassion and generosity. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ash took Grace back to the Hidden Valley, just the two of them, leaving the children in the care of Frank and his wife. It was spring again, and the wildflowers were in full bloom, even more spectacular than Grace remembered. They spread a blanket, older and grayer than the young couple who had kissed there 2 decades before, but no less in love. 20 years, Ash said, pulling Grace close. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you showed up at my ranch, all business and determination, demanding I pay what I owed. Other times it feels like I've loved you my whole life. Both are true, Grace said softly. Time is strange that way. But I do know this. Every day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days, the losses and struggles, they were all made bearable because I had you beside me. I came out here to ask you something, Ash said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box, similar to the one he had produced when he proposed all those years ago. Grace laughed. Are you proposing again, in a way? He opened the box to reveal a beautiful necklace with a pendant shaped like a wildflower. 20 years ago, I asked for your heart. You gave it to me freely, along with your hand and your life. I want you to know that I treasure those gifts every single day. I want to renew our vows, not in a church with witnesses, but here, just the two of us, in the place where we first declared our love. Tears streamed down Grace's face as Ash fastened the necklace around her throat. Then they stood, hands clasped, and spoke their vows again, older and simpler this time, but no less meaningful. I love you, Grace Hayes. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you, Ashford Hayes. You are my heart, my home, my everything. They kissed in the field of wildflowers, and Grace thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had come to Wyoming to collect a debt, desperate and grieving. She had found so much more than money. She had found love, partnership, family, and home. She had found the man who would ask for her heart, and then spend his life proving himself worthy of the gift. The sun was setting as they rode back to the ranch, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. From the rise above the house, they could see their home spread out before them, the barns and corrals, the pastures full of cattle, the house with smoke rising from the chimney where their children were probably helping prepare supper. No regrets? Ash asked, echoing his question from years before. None, Grace replied firmly. Only gratitude, only love, only joy. As they rode down to the ranch together, side by side as they had been for 20 years and would be for all the years to come, Grace silently thanked her father. His debts had brought her to Bentonville, but his wisdom, perhaps unintentional, had given her something far more valuable than money. He had led her to a man who would pay what was owed, and then offer everything he had in return for her heart. It had been the best trade she ever made, the debt that had saved her life in more ways than one, and the beginning of a love story that would last forever. Thomas eventually took over management of the ranch, working alongside his father, and married a kind young woman from a neighboring ranch. Beth became a renowned artist whose paintings of Wyoming landscapes were sought after across the country, though she never strayed far from home. Robert, their youngest, became a veterinarian, using his skills to care for animals throughout the region. Grace and Ash lived to see their grandchildren born and grow, lived to celebrate 50 years of marriage surrounded by family and friends in the same church hall where they had wed. They remained active on the ranch well into their later years, though Thomas gradually assumed more responsibility. In their final years, they would sit on the porch just as they always had, watching the sunset and holding hands, their love as strong as ever. Grace never stopped being grateful for the day she had ridden out to a stranger's ranch to collect a debt. Ash never stopped being thankful that she had come into his life and changed it forever. When they were both gone, their children would tell the story of how their parents met, the tale of the woman who came to collect a debt and the rancher who paid it and asked for her heart in return. It became a family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to the greatest destinations, and that true love, when found, is worth more than all the gold in the world. The Double H Ranch continued to thrive for generations, always remaining in the Hayes family, a testament to what Grace and Ash had built together. And in the hidden valley where wildflowers bloomed each spring, their descendants would sometimes go to remember the couple whose love story had started it all, whose courage and faith and devotion had created a legacy that would never fade. Grace had come to collect a debt of $3,000. She left with something infinitely more valuable. A love that would echo through time, a family that would grow and flourish, and the knowledge that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is take a chance on something, or someone, unexpected. The debt had been paid in full, But the returns on that payment, measured in love and life and legacy, would compound forever, enriching not just Grace and Ash but all who came after them. And so their story ended not with an ending at all, but with a beginning that never ceased, a love that never died, and a family that would carry their names and their values forward into a future they could only have dreamed of on that hot summer day in 1883, when Grace Morrison rode up to Ash Hayes's ranch and changed both their lives forever.